You need to learn when to stop asking questions.
All right, Patrick Klepek. We talked last week on Decoding TV about True Detective Night Country and about how, from our perception, it felt like there were a lot of people making fun of the show each week online. And I also posted about this on Threads. We posted about it on YouTube. We got a lot of reactions. A bunch of people saying, "What? No, no one I know is criticizing it at all." And then, like, I posted on Threads, and my thread went like mini viral, I would say. It got like hundreds or thousands of quotes and stuff like that. And some people were saying, what? Like, I have nothing but love for the show. Where is the criticism? And I'm like, literally in the thread that you're responding to, there's like 15 people who don't like the show. We will try to represent all perspectives. And by the way, I want to remind people, Patrick Klepek and I actually enjoy True Detective Night Country. Like, we actually are defenders of it.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, I'm finding a lot of criticism, including from within my household.
Oh no!
About the show, yeah.
Toxic fans have made it into David Chen's house.
I wouldn't say toxic. Certainly, critical, discerning viewers have made it into my household. Pernicious Ducks at decodingtv.com writes, "Can we just rename True Detective Night Country to Alaska Sucks, You Should Feel Bad? That would better set expectations, as there's almost no detectiving happening. I just do not like this season, and while I did enjoy season 1, I thought the ending was underwhelming and I didn't have great love for it. If I didn't know that it was explicit that this season was written by a woman, I would swear it was written by a guy who hates women." The two leads are stereotypes of women in law enforcement. The one who sleeps her way to the top, and the other hates guys and is out to protect all women. Yes, there is some nuance there, but that's their mold. You also have the wife who gives her cop husband nothing but grief. 6 guys got turned into a screaming corpsicle, but don't you dare have to work OT. The rebellious teen daughter that might as well be from Justified City Primeval with thankfully less screen time. It's infuriating. The younger male cop just can't catch a break and is somehow the only character I feel any sympathy for. Dude, just move away. It's not worth it, end quote. I would say that does a good job of summarizing what some people's issues are with the show. We also posted this at YouTube, a lot of YouTube comments. One My Hayes writes, quote, "I like the Night Country and I'm on board for it. However, the main problem I have is that it is a mystery show instead of being a detective show. Every episode brings in more questions instead of giving us answers to anything. At this point, we are past 4 episodes and we still don't understand the dynamics involved in some of the characters' relationships. That's a no-no. That's the definition of a mystery. Evidently, they're waiting until the finale to make the big reveal, but how many people will still be watching by then? I'm concerned that the reveal will still leave quite a few mysteries unanswered," end quote. We did get a comment from Red Jack 10 who writes, "All the groups and discords I'm in have had a hell of a time live commenting and theorizing week to week," end quote. So anyway, a lot of diversity of opinions. Some people who are like, I love the show and I've never heard anyone speak badly about the show, and Decoding TV, how dare you introduce this idea into my life? To which I say, fair criticism of Decoding TV. I'm sorry that the podcast brings in outside ideas sometimes. But Patrick Klepek, I am curious, like, did you have any reaction to the reaction to our conversation last week before we get to this week's episode?
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting. I mean, in some ways, I feel like what you're seeing reflects the different bubbles. And I don't mean that in a pejorative sense. I mean that in, like, what are the groups that we choose to surround ourselves to engage with media? Like, so that's going to be a Discord. Like, I think there's probably a difference between, like, engaging with responses to this show through a broad social platform like a Threads or a Twitter versus watching it in like a safe collective sort of space like a Discord, which are probably all people you know or mostly know in some form, right? And that probably deeply influences the tenor, the intensity, the amount of toxicity of like a discourse and the directions it takes. And so it wouldn't shock me if people like, well, in my circles, people are just talking about the show, but like, what is how wide is that circle, right? Like, if you're in YouTube comments, like, of videos, like, theorizing about the show, my guess is you are seeing a much different picture being painted of what this show is, the quality of it, how people are responding to its storytelling choices than if it is just in your smaller group of, friends. And so I think to some degree, I look at that as reflective of just how people choose to watch things and how they share those experiences with other people.
We talked a little bit about this last week. We should acknowledge, obviously, there is a strain of toxicity that is going to result no matter what happens, because this is a show that used to have dudes, and now it has women leading it. And there are some people that really don't like to see that, and will therefore criticize it as woke or whatever. And it's, yeah, I will say, I certainly don't support any of that. Don't support any of those people. Don't support any of that type of opinion. But I do think that there are legitimate grievances that one can have with this show, and that's kind
Absolutely.
of what is difficult to navigate these days is, do you not like the Last Jedi, or do you just have issues with the Last Jedi, or are you part of these toxic fan groups that, are going to issue death threats to people because they love the Last Jedi, or whatever it is,
Right.
it's having any kind of reasonable discourse is difficult these days. That said, always appreciate the comments at decodingtv.com and at youtube.com/decodingtv, which are largely quite civil, I would say. Uh, they might disagree, but largely quite civil. TikTok, on the other hand, that's a whole different thing. We'll have to talk about that later. Patrick Klepek, True Detective Night Country Part 5. What'd you think of the episode?
Well, this kind of relates to what we just talked about.
Yeah.
I don't know this should have been called True Detective. I think there were some potentially some, and I don't, and that is not necessarily a failure on Lopez's part, the showrunner, to like for what they've tried to do here. But I do think, I even expressed when we last chatted, like, enough with the goddamn spirals. And I just feel like that stuff is distracting from what the show is trying to do, what the show is good at. And like there are problems with this show that are storytelling issues. I don't think either of us would call this like a perfect work, even when we're being like most charitable to what it's trying to accomplish. But I do think the weight of what people expect from something called True Detective does not line up with the aims of what this show is trying to do. Absolutely. And I think that goes a very long way to explaining how much are people criticizing the genuinely, like, what is on the page, what is on the screen, versus this didn't match my expectations. So now, because of that conflict, everything that doesn't work for me in this show is viewed through that lens, in which there are very few ways for this show to really win and mostly ways for it to lose, because it's not the show that I want. And I didn't watch seasons 2 and 3, but if we're taking this mostly as a backlash to season 1, I think this show was kind of handed a bad hand from a perception. Like, I can get past that and just engage with the work as is. I don't feel hung up on season 1 and its mechanics and and the dynamics that it had. But being most charitable to the people who are like deeply frustrated through the season, as it goes further and we near this conclusion, I see that as like a bigger and bigger weight for this show to carry every episode that it gets deeper. And I think it's ultimately done the show, for what I do like about it, a great disservice to essentially even have been called like True Detective. Because I think it's forcing people to view it through a lens that is, I think, unfair. All that said, I think I texted you. I was like, I don't think I'm getting my monster in a cave. I don't think. Who knows? I don't think there's a big creature waiting for me at the end. Maybe I can be surprised, but I have to admit, I am. If that's where we end up, I think I'll be a little disappointed with the arc of this season, because I think it is played fast and loose with horror imagery in a way that has given me expectations that I don't necessarily know the show is willing or interested in delivering on. And if all of the manifestations of the supernatural are tied up in, well, really uncharitably, it's like a lot of people who have like mental illness. Like, we're just all going to put this on projections of like people who's are struggling with mental illness. Like, that's not a great place to be for how we're going to like hand wave away a lot of what people are seeing. Hopefully there'll be more to it by the end that doesn't make me feel as potentially perturbed by like that interpretation of all of the supernatural or supernatural adjacent storytelling or imagery that we're seeing. But I mean, overall, good. The ending is like undeniably shocking and fascinating. But I don't know, where are you with the show at this point?
Great points about whether it should have been called True Detective. It's hard to not think about the alternate future or the alternate reality where this was just called Night Country.
Yeah.
And it's just like, hey, it's a Night Country thing. There's no connections to Rusty Cole or any Travis Cole or anything like that. And it's just a mini series about these two detectives trying to figure out this case. And yeah, I don't know, man. Like, it might not have gotten as many viewers as it has, but it would probably have like a more engaged viewership that's less complaining, because I think you're right. It has the weight of the True Detective stuff on it. And we should point out that one of the reasons that is a problem is that the detecting that is happening on the show is pretty unsatisfying. Basically Pryor is doing all the work, right? Like Pryor shows up every 20 minutes and he's like, hey, I did like 3 hours of research and dug this, and it's like we don't see any of it.
I did detective work.
We don't see any of that stuff, right? It's just we're mostly spend a lot of time dwelling on the vibes of the town, or on like the past of like all these terrible things that have happened, or on the interpersonal conflicts between these characters. And I agree, it would have been great to have a show without the weight of the True Detective name attached to it. What do I think of the show? I actually think the mystery is like pretty rough. Like, and this episode like ostensibly resolves it. Like, hey, by the way, we're gonna. It turns out that they actually were dead all along, or what? Like, there was no killer or any. Obviously, I think that's going to be subverted in the next episode in some way. But the way the show has handled the mystery, I would say, has been pretty unsatisfying. Now, the other stuff, I think, has been pretty great. Do you want to know how miserable it is to live in a remote town where sometimes of the year there's no daylight? And if the answer to that question is yes, I honestly think, no irony, this show does a really good job at illustrating that. And at illustrating, what happens when like one company owns everything in the town, and like what happens when like everyone knows each other and people become destructive forces, and all the setting, it looks beautiful. The relationships seem very plausible. One of my favorite scenes in this episode came from Kavik and Navarro like have like a tender moment, and like that's really lovely. And so I buy all that stuff. Now, is that what I wanted when I started watching True Detective Night Country? Like, not necessarily,
No.
But if that's what you are looking for, I think you will actually get it, and that is anthropologically valuable, as a thing. So basically, Patrick Klepek, my expectations are near the floor for the finale in terms of the story, like the main through line detective story. Is there going to be something that ties everything together? Maybe. But as we discussed last week, I have enjoyed the vibes. And I do think that this week, the vibes got real scary real fast, right? Like, the biggest thing that happens is Pryor is forced to kill his dad in the episode. It is a shocking, like, we get a lot of backstory about the dad. The dad has like, obviously we know he got catfished, but the dad has also been working in conjunction with this woman who owns the whole town, and like she's been bribing him, and she's like, you got to get rid of this Otis guy because he could lead them to this mine where like there's some horrible secret that we need to kill to, any guesses as to what it is, Patrick Klepek?
Well, the Pryor's father says he didn't kill Annie, right? He just moved the body.
Right.
So my presumption is there's more bodies, but that doesn't solve like the mystery. Still don't know why we had to blow up the entrance to like, what is it? I don't know what
Right.
they're
It's
hiding.
I think that we're running into this issue, Patrick Klepek, where it's hard for us to imagine that there is something in the mind that is going to make this whole thing satisfying, right? Like that's
But not only that, I don't have a spectrum of things to imagine in the mind. You know what I mean? Like,
right, like yeah,
it's not like it's a mystery box or like I said, like I think they've sort of they pretty cleanly cut off the supernatural. Like again, I don't think they're going in there and on the spooky cell phone video on the other side is some sort of ancient legacy creature that has been like
that's
existing in the
everyone
mind.
at Salal knows about it, and they're trying to cover it up, and they're like, please, they're like, do not go in there, right? Like
Yes.
that's probably not what Salal is hiding. Is some supernatural creature in your estimation,
Right. And if I was just like, I couldn't make you a list of 5 things that I think are in the mind.
Right.
And I think that's a failure on the show's part to to better define what I'm fine. I love mysteries. Like I'm fine with not knowing, but I don't even know what to be surprised by. You know what I mean? Like I don't even have a dimension to be thinking in. And I think that is ultimately a failure on the show to set us up for a final episode that by virtue of having no sense of what could be on the other side, whatever it delivers seems primed to be disappointment because it hasn't properly prepared you for like what it could be. Even if it ends up subverting that, even ends up being surprising, I don't have anything to be subverted by, like because I don't have like.
Right.
I mean, one thing people like the show had spent 5 episodes going, there's gonna be a monster in there.
Well,
and then there's not. And then there's not. It's like, oh, well, I can't believe this is actually what's going on.
I would argue that there's enough in there for you to expect some monster of some kind, but the problem is you and I feel that that's probably not going to happen, right? Like
it feels too grounded at this point. Yeah,
there's enough. You know, the very first episode. Oh, she's here. She's awake. You know, like the cell phone video. Like there's enough stuff that you can feel like maybe there is a monster in there. Now, you and I don't actually feel that, but I think you're underselling the possibility of a monster a little bit.
I hope so. Because look, I want there to be a monster, dude. All I want is for the same amount of incredible effects work to create the corpsicle has also been put into some sort of cosmic creature that is going to be under the ice. That's what I want. Even if I don't think that's actually going to be the case. But maybe they're extracting energy from this ancient creature and like yes, it's resulting in the deaths of some small children. Small price to pay for the cosmic god energy. Like you take what you can get.
I want to call out again, I think all the stuff with Hank and Peter in this episode was actually really amazing. Like the final sequence where like the way the final sequence unfolds, I think is actually quite brilliant. The last 10 minutes of the episode, where Hank shows up and then says to Danvers, "Hey, I'm looking for Otis," and she says, "Well, you can't have him." And he's like, "He's here right now." You know, he didn't necessarily know. It wasn't clear to me if he knew that he was there. I think he may have known. But either way, it's like it becomes a whole different situation. And then when his son busts in with the gun raised, that's when he realizes, like, oh, I have nothing to live for anymore. Like, my my mail order bride catfished me. My son doesn't think I'm a good person. Like, I can't actually get this job because I can't do the task that was asked of me. So
well, he seemed to spend all the money he got from the previous. There's a moment where Pryor asks, "Did you send her any money?" And I believe there is a phone call we hear earlier in the season where he says like her mother is sick or something like that. And then when he's in the car with and I
love how he just changes the topic when he asks like, did you send her any money by any chance, Dad? And he's like, he just changes the topic, which is very.
And when he's in the car with the executive, like, well, we gave you money. He's like, well, that money's gone. It's like clearly you spent it on this woman that swindled it from you.
Yeah. But then he knows like he's going to commit suicide by cop, and that cop being his son, which is like a very heartbreaking, poignant moment. That culminates the episode, and I think it was. This is like, okay, this isn't the show that I thought this would be, but it's like it's very poignant, it's very well done.
Yeah.
And I actually thought this episode was really strong, again, for what this show is trying to accomplish, which
Agreed.
a lot of people might not be buying into. So trying to figure out if there's anything else to mention in the episode. We do see a little bit more of like Danvers' daughter getting into challenging situations with the protests and so on and so forth.
That is one part of the show I wish there was a little more substance to. Like, I like the fact that we spent meaningful time at the protests, where it unpacked or at least demonstrated a little bit more of sort of like the anger for these folks who feel trampled on, aggrieved, exploited by like the energy company there. We don't get a lot of their views are expressed by an extension of this is essentially a company town, and there's speculation that their work there is producing these stillborn children, but we don't actually get a ton of insight into their voices. And so at least here, you know, it's convenient for the character and their arc, but also I liked the fact that we at least spent a little bit of time with like their protest and like how that fits within the world of this town.
Yeah. Some major plot developments happen. I just want to list them real quick.
Sure.
So Connolly claims that the Salalmen died in a freak slab avalanche, that there's nothing.
The slab avalanche.
Yeah, there's actually nothing. And, you know, Danvers doesn't believe it. There's also this moment, what's going on with the swirly symbol. Apparently it's a symbol from hunters telling you that don't go there because the ice might swallow you whole. And so that's the origin of the symbol, and we'll see how it comes into play later. And then we get a little bit more detail about Wheeler as well and what happened there. Basically, it seems like Navarro had some kind of hallucination or vision, right? When that happened, and Danvers is able to identify this. And that was also, by the way, another really awesome moment when Pryor is questioning Danvers about the Wheeler case.
Yeah.
And starts asking her questions like she's taught him to, and, you know, wrong question. And then when he drops the question of like, did you know that Wheeler was left-handed? It's like, I gasped. I just had like a, you know, because it's like, oh shit. And it's such a great way of, it's such a great reveal because it requires the audience to like put a lot of stuff together too. Like you can put it all together in your mind of like, why is that question significant, right? You need to like know why that question is significant up until that point. It's a very rewarding, satisfying one. Overall, there's some great moments in this episode, I just have to say.
Yeah.
Like, I really like the episode. You started it on a down note. I'm trying to end it on an up.
Well, I think it's because it's difficult to talk about this episode. I'll think about this episode profoundly differently.
Right.
Based on what happens next, right? Like, I think part of what's so difficult talking about this show is I think it would have benefited. Like, I think you and I are, well, I don't know if this is actually true. Like, I largely wish shows came out at slower paces so you could talk about them. Like, we talk about culture, like having cultural moments. I like that HBO is like one of the few places that hasn't given up on that. I like the fact that their shows come out on a weekly basis so you can talk about it, marinate it, and like really anticipate the next like piece of storytelling. This show, like, it had not benefited. Like, there's a lot, we talked about things that has not worked for it. I think the weekly model has not worked for this show, and that is partially will be better informed by what happens in the finale. Because in a world where maybe this helps explain some of the gap between the public reaction to this show and the critical reaction to the show, is maybe we'll be surprised and like it ends on like a pretty like great like season or like, you know, series finale, and it's like, oh wow, this puts the entire thing in a different perspective because now I see the whole arc of where it was going. But when it feels like it's being drip fed, it doesn't necessarily work as well. So I feel like a lot of my thoughts about this episode are tinged a little bit sharper just because I need the other shoe to drop. And so I find myself just deeply waiting for that so I can actually know how to feel about the big picture.
Hey everyone, David Chen here. Thank you so much for watching that video from Decoding TV. If you want to get an audio version of the show, all you got to do is go to podcast.decodingtv.com. And if you want to support what we do, get ad-free episodes of the podcast and also bonus episodes of the podcast, go to decodingtv.com and become a paid member. Of course, you can also like and subscribe for more. We appreciate it. Thanks. See you later.